70 million lives. That is the staggering human cost of the deadliest conflict in our history. World War II wasn't just a series of battles. It was a total collapse of civilization that reshaped the entire globe. From the frozen steppes of Russia to the sweltering jungles of the Pacific, the world was engulfed in fire. But to understand how it ended, we must understand how it began, rising from the ashes of the First World War. The date was September 1st, 1939. Under the command of Adolf Hitler, the German war machine smashed across the Polish border. This was the debut of a terrifying new tactic, Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Utilizing speed, surprise, and overwhelming mechanized force, Germany crushed Poland in weeks. Britain and France declared war, but they were powerless to stop the fall of Warsaw. The storm had officially broken over Europe. After a deceptive lull known as the Phony War, Hitler turned his eyes west in 1940. In a shocking display of incompetence by the Allies and brilliance by the Germans, France, a military superpower, collapsed in just 6 weeks. With Europe under Nazi control, only Great Britain stood alone. The ensuing Battle of Britain was fought entirely in the skies. It was the first major defeat for Hitler, proving the island nation would not surrender easily. Frustrated in the West, Hitler made his fatal mistake. In June 1941, he launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. 3 million Axis troops marched east, opening the largest theater of war in history. Initially, the advance was unstoppable, but as winter set in, the German army froze at the gates of Moscow. The brutal Russian winter became the Soviet Union's greatest ally, halting the Nazi juggernaut in its tracks. While Europe burned, the war went global. On December 7, 1941, Imperial Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. They awakened a sleeping giant. The United States entered the war with immediate industrial fury. The conflict was now truly a world war, with the Allies, Britain, the Soviet Union, and the U.S. united against the Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan. In the Pacific, the turning point came just 6 months later at the Battle of Midway. In a stunning naval victory, American dive bombers sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, halting Japan's expansion in the Pacific forever. Back in Europe, the war turned in North Africa at Alamein, and then in Russia at the Battle of Stalingrad. Stalingrad remains one of the bloodiest battles in human history, a meat grinder that destroyed the 6th German Army. By 1943, the Allies were on the offensive. They invaded Sicily and Italy, striking at the soft underbelly of Europe. Mussolini's regime crumbled, but fierce German resistance turned Italy into a slow, painful slog. The decisive blow in the West finally came on June 6, 1944, D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, breaking through Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Fighting through the hedgerows of Normandy was brutal, but by August, Paris was liberated. The joy of the French people was a brief, bright spot in a war that was becoming increasingly desperate for the Nazis. As the Allies closed in from the west, the Soviets were steamrolling from the east. In a last-ditch gamble, Hitler launched the Battle of the Bulge in winter 1944, but the Allied line bent without breaking. By the spring of 1945, the end was inevitable. The Allies crossed the Rhine into Germany, while the Red Army encircled Berlin. The race to the capital was on, and the destruction of the Third Reich was at hand. As Allied troops advanced, they uncovered the true horror of the Nazi regime, the concentration camps. The Holocaust had systematically murdered 6 million Jews and millions of others. The world was left in shock. On April 30th, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. Days later, Germany surrendered. VE Day, victory in Europe, was celebrated wildly, but the war in the Pacific still raged on with terrifying ferocity. The U.S. strategy of island hopping had brought them to Japan's doorstep. Battles at Iwo Jima and Okinawa were apocalyptic, with Japanese soldiers fighting to the death rather than surrendering. Fearing an invasion of mainland Japan would cost 1 million American lives, President Truman made a controversial decision. He authorized the use of a new, terrible weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6th and 9th, 1945, bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation was absolute. Cities were vaporized in an instant, ushering in the nuclear age. Japan surrendered on August 15th. World War II was finally over. The world had been saved from tyranny, but the geopolitical map was forever altered. The war left Europe in ruins and marked the rise of two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Their uneasy allyship quickly dissolved, setting the stage for the Cold War. Out of the ashes, the United Nations was born, founded with the hope of preventing such a catastrophe from ever happening again. The Nuremberg trials established that following orders was no excuse for crimes against humanity. World War II accelerated technology from jet engines and rockets to computers and nuclear energy. It changed the role of women in the workforce and ended the age of colonial empires. But ultimately, remember the people, the soldiers who stormed the beaches, the resistance fighters in the shadows, and the innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. Their sacrifice bought our freedom. 70 million lives. As the generation that fought this war passes into history, it is our duty to remember, because those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it.